The void of space tore open like fabric ripping at the seams. A massive vessel, the Persistence, tumbled through the rift, emergency thrusters firing in chaotic bursts as it struggled to stabilize. Navigation systems back online in 3, 2, 1. Lieutenant Park's voice was steady despite the chaos on the bridge. Holographic displays flickered to life, bathing the command center in blue light. Captain Elena Rodriguez brushed debris from her uniform and straightened her posture. Status report. We've completed the jump, Captain, but Park's voice faltered. This isn't Ta City. The main view screen cleared, revealing not the empty space near their target planet, but a vast, organized formation of ships. Hundreds of them. Sleek, predatory vessels arranged in perfect geometric patterns around what appeared to be a massive space station adorned with glowing sigils. Or rather, what had been a space station. The Persistence's unexpected arrival had torn through one section of the ornate structure, leaving a jagged wound in its side. Debris scattered outward in a glittering cloud, some pieces still glowing hot from the impact. Are those warships? Rodriguez squinted at the screen. Affirmative. I count 347 vessels of varying configurations, all of unknown design, all now powering weapons. Park's fingers danced across the holographic interface. And Captain, we're being broadcast across thousands of channels. Whatever we hit was important. Chief Engineer Dave Chen burst onto the bridge, his uniform stained with coolant fluid. The warp drives fried. Whatever happened during the jump scrambled the dimensional calibrators. We're stuck here for at least. He finally looked at the view screen. Oh hell. Rodriguez took a deep breath. 10,000 colonists depended on her next decision. Earth's first interstellar mission couldn't end in disaster on its first jump. Open a channel, she said. Standard first contact protocols. Captain. Security Chief Martins protested. We should raise shields first. Those ships air. Those ships are watching us. Chief. They could have fired already if they wanted to. Rodriguez straightened her uniform again. First impressions matter. The communications array established a connection on multiple frequencies. Across the alien armada, bridge crews watched in astonishment as a human face appeared on their screens. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth colonial vessel Persistence, she announced with a warm smile. We apologize for our unexpected arrival and any damage caused. There seems to have been a navigation error. We come in peace and would welcome dialogue. In the Imperial flagship, Supreme Overlord Zixvan received the transmission with mounting horror. The humans had destroyed the sacred Guardian platform, a monument to the Empire's first conquest 50 millennia ago, and their leader was smiling about it. More disturbing, the Empire's psychic scanners were reporting anomalous readings from the human vessel. Their minds were chaotic, unpredictable, and somehow resistant to the standard fear-inducing frequencies that had subjugated 100 species. They mock us with this pretense, hissed his chief advisor. No civilization would dare attack the heart of the Centauri Empire without a massive fleet unless they possessed weapons beyond our comprehension. Zixtan's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the human captain's face. Perhaps that is their weapon, he whispered. This incomprehensible confidence. Back on the Persistence, Rodriguez waited for a response. The bridge crew held their breath as the massive alien ships adjusted position, surrounding them in a tightening formation. Any response to our transmission? Rodriguez asked. Park shook his head. Nothing yet, but they're scanning us intensively. Every frequency, every spectrum. Keep the channel open, Rodriguez ordered. And someone find me everything we know about first contact protocols with potentially hostile species. I have a feeling we're going to need more than just a friendly hello. Chen looked at the alien ships through the view screen and chuckled nervously. On the bright side, Captain, we've definitely made history. First humans to meet aliens, even if it's by crashing their party. Let's just hope, Rodriguez replied, watching the alien fleet's movements, that were not also the last. The Imperial meeting chamber was designed to intimidate. Towering black pillars carved from the bones of conquered worlds stretched 50 meters toward a ceiling that shimmered with constellations, a real-time map of the Centauri Empire's 10,000 subjugated star systems. The floor, polished to mirror-like perfection, reflected everything above, creating a dizzying infinity effect that had caused many foreign dignitaries to lose their balance and composure. Captain Rodriguez entered with a small delegation, carrying hand-woven baskets filled with symbolic gifts: Earth foods, digital libraries, art, and music. Standard first contact protocol from a civilization that had never actually made first contact before. Impressive architecture, whispered Engineer Chen, craning his neck, though the acoustics must be terrible for everyday conversation. Security Chief Martins kept her hand near her sidearm. Focus, Dave. Remember the briefing. We're technically prisoners, not guests. Prisoners don't usually get a welcoming ceremony, Chen replied, holding up the gift basket, even one this tense. A dissonant tone echoed through the chamber, and the Centauri entourage appeared. Leading them was a towering figure encased in biomechanical armor that shifted and pulsed like a living thing. Supreme Overlord Zixvan stood nearly 4 meters tall in his ceremonial battle suit, designed over millennia to incorporate the most psychologically terrifying elements from across the galaxy. Is it just me, Rodriguez murmured to her team, or does his armor look like it's breathing? Scanning indicates biological components integrated with mechanical systems, Park confirmed quietly. And yes, it's respiring. The Centauri delegation arranged themselves in precise formation. With a gesture from Zixvan, a low-frequency hum permeated the chamber, the Empire's infamous psionic intimidation field that had brought mighty civilizations to their knees without a single shot fired. The humans shifted uncomfortably. Is the air conditioning malfunctioning? Rodriguez asked, fanning herself. It's getting a bit stuffy in here. Zixvan's inner eyelids flicked in confusion. The intimidation field was at maximum power, enough to induce paralytic terror in most species. These humans merely looked mildly inconvenienced. You stand BFOREVET of XXTNTKRIX, boomed the Emperor's voice, amplified to bone-rattling levels. Your UVNPROVUOKED on our sacred guardian platform. AHS violated 3 Human to read 74 Imperial DCREDAS. Rodriguez stepped forward with practiced diplomatic poise. Supreme Overlord, we deeply regret any damage caused by our navigation error. Earth extends its sincere apologies and offers these tokens of peaceful intent. She gestured to the gift baskets. Chen moved forward with his basket, but his boot caught on the reflective floor. He stumbled, the basket tumbling from his hands. Coffee packets, chocolate bars, and a ceremonial data crystal scattered across the polished surface. Worst of all, a sealed container of coffee slid directly toward a pedestal displaying what appeared to be an ancient artifact, a crystalline structure that hummed with inner light. No, no, no. Chen lunged after it, but too late. The coffee container struck the pedestal. The artifact wobbled, tipped, and fell directly into Chen's outstretched hands. The entire Centauri delegation gasped collectively. Got it, Chen announced triumphantly, holding the artifact. Then, noticing the horror on alien faces, added, sorry about that, just let me. He attempted to wipe condensation from the artifact with his sleeve. The crystal structure illuminated at his touch, ancient circuitry awakening after 20 millennia of dormancy. A holographic face materialized above it, the preserved consciousness of an ancient Centauri philosopher king. Who disturbs my slumber? The entity demanded in the ancient imperial tongue. The Centauri guards drew weapons. Rodriguez tensed, preparing for the worst. Chen, however, stared at the hologram with fascination. Hello there. I'm Dave. Sorry about waking you up. Interesting neural preservation technique you've got here. Quantum state suspension. The ancient intelligence paused, analyzing this strange creature who spoke so casually to a being once worshipped as a god. Your species is ion, it inquired. Human. From Earth. We're kind of new to the galactic neighborhood, Chen replied, grinning. Hey, quick question. Is your consciousness stored in binary, or do you use a quantum base 12 system? Because the crystal structure suggests. Fascinating, the ancient intelligence interrupted, its tone shifting from threatening to curious. You and computational architecture. Emperor Zixvan watched in mounting horror as the sacred guardian of knowledge, unapproachable even to the imperial family, engaged in casual technical banter with the human engineer, who was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, still holding the priceless artifact, while making jokes about primitive counting systems. As I was saying, Rodriguez continued smoothly, addressing the emperor as if nothing unusual had happened. We hope to establish peaceful relations and would appreciate guidance to the nearest habitable system, since we're obviously in the wrong neighborhood. Zixvan's voice trembled despite his amplifiers. You are designated Class 1 threat species. All communication must proceed through formal imperial channels. Wonderful, Rodriguez replied with a diplomatic smile. Would you prefer afternoon or evening meetings? We're flexible with time zones. Humans accidentally invade a galactic empire, and they're unfazed. Part 3. Reluctant Neighbors. This is what they're offering us. Dr. Amara Okafor squinted at the atmospheric readings on her tablet. The Xentari delegation had just left after presenting their generous accommodation for the stranded humans. Settlement rights on a barren moon they called Kexanar, the Forsaken. Captain Rodriguez sighed. It's either this or remain confined to the ship while they process our case, which their ambassador implied could take decades. Chief Engineer Chen peered over Okafor's shoulder at the readings. Sulfuric acid rain, methane pockets, and background radiation that would make Chernobyl jealous. Charming vacation spot. Can we survive there? Rodriguez asked bluntly. Okafor scrolled through the data, her expression shifting from concern to thoughtful calculation. Atmospheric toxicity is roughly equivalent to industrial Los Angeles circa 2030s, before the clean air restoration. Not immediately lethal with proper filtration. She tapped another section of data. The radiation is problematic but manageable with shielding. We'd need to establish habitats quickly, but... She looked up with unexpected optimism. We've got 10,000 colonists who were prepared to terraform a new world anyway. This just accelerates our timeline. Rodriguez nodded. We accept their offer then. Start preparations immediately. Imperial Science Observer Kextal crouched behind a ridge of black volcanic glass, adjusting his environment suit's settings. The Xentari High Command had assigned him to monitor the human settlement and catalog their inevitable extinction. His recording would serve as a warning to other species who might consider defying the Empire. It had been 3 standard Imperial weeks since the humans had arrived on the Forsaken. By all scientific models, they should be dying by now. Instead, they were thriving. Through his high-powered scope, Kextal watched in disbelief as humans worked outside in what appeared to be minimal protective gear. They had cannibalized parts of their ship to construct interconnected habitat domes and were now expanding outward, building greenhouses from locally sourced materials. Most perplexing of all, they appeared to be farming in soil that could dissolve metal. Kextal adjusted his audio receivers to eavesdrop on a group of humans wearing simplified breathing apparatus. Peterson, you're up, called one of them, holding a transparent container. A human stepped forward, removing his breathing mask completely. He took a deep breath of the toxic air, held it momentarily, then exhaled. Definitely sulfur dioxide with a hint of chlorine, Peterson declared confidently. I'm picking up notes of methane. And, is that hydrogen sulfide? Correct. The first human made a notation on a portable device. That's 3 points for team maintenance. Engineering team, you're falling behind. They were turning atmospheric sampling into a game, with prizes. Kextal's mandibles clicked in agitation as he continued his observations. The humans had established a functioning settlement in an environment classified as lethal by imperial standards. They had adapted their technology, created renewable food sources, and were expanding their operation daily. Most disturbing of all, they'd captured several automated psychological warfare drones, devices designed to broadcast subliminal terror messages, and were now using them to deliver beverages. Kextal nearly fell from his hiding spot when a modified Imperial drone hovered past, its menacing red sensor array replaced with blinking blue lights, and its weapon hardpoints now supporting what appeared to be a tray of steaming cups. Coffee delivery for hydroponic steam. The drone announced in a cheerful voice that bore no resemblance to its original intimidating tone. A small human child, offspring were surviving here, ran up to the drone and patted its casing affectionately. "Thanks, Mr. Sparkles." The child took a cup and added what appeared to be a colorful sticker to the drone's housing, joining dozens of others that now covered its once fearsome black surface. The drone bobbed in what could only be described as a pleased manner before continuing on its delivery route. Kextal's mandibles trembled as he recorded everything. The implications were terrifying. If humans could not only survive but domesticate Imperial technology on the Forsaken, what else might they be capable of? He was so absorbed in his observations that he didn't notice the human approaching his position until a shadow fell over him. "Hi there," said a woman in a lightweight environment suit. "I'm Dr. Okafor, head of our xenobiology team. We've noticed you watching us for the past few weeks and thought it was time for a proper introduction." She extended a hand toward the frozen Centauri observer. "Would you like to come in for some tea? We've been hoping to learn more about your species without all the Imperial formalities getting in the way." Kextal stared at the offered hand, his perception of reality crumbling around him. The Empire had sent him to document extinction. Instead, he was being invited to tea. The Imperial Information Ministry's Central Command Center buzzed with frantic activity. Screens lining the walls displayed various news feeds from across the Empire, each one carefully curated and controlled. "Until now. We can't contain it any longer," Exalted One, Information Minister Vexmore's voice quavered as he addressed the holographic projection of Emperor Zixspawn. "The footage has spread to 6,213 worlds despite our best countermeasures." On the central screen played the now infamous consumption contest video, a human child of no more than 8 standard years sharing the table with a Xentauri war beast, a creature bred for centuries to consume armor plating on enemy vessels. Both were eating what appeared to be nutrient plates, with a diverse crowd cheering them on. "She's going to win," a voice shouted as the small human girl finished her plate seconds before the massive creature, whose handler looked on in disbelief. The Emperor's hologram flickered with rage. How did this happen? A trade delegation from the Krell hegemony was permitted to visit the human settlement as a gesture of Imperial transparency, Vexmore explained. They recorded the event despite explicit prohibitions. "And the outcome?" the Emperor demanded. Vexmore swallowed nervously. The humans welcomed the delegation into their food court, as they call it. The Krell brought a war beast as protection. The humans, rather than showing appropriate fear, invited the handler to enter their offspring in what they termed a friendly competition. "And the human child won," the Emperor stated flatly. "Yes, Exalted One. Humans apparently possess extraordinarily efficient digestive enzymes and can consume almost anything organic. They've already adapted several highly toxic Kexanar native plants into what they call condiments." The Emperor's image seethed. "Destroy all copies of the recording." "We've tried, Exalted One, but it's been remixed with human music. There are now thousands of variants. Worst of all," Vexmore hesitated. "Speak." Underground resistance movements across 17 sectors have adopted human phrases and styles. The Muri resistance cells now sign their communications with "Hold my beer," apparently a human idiom indicating one is about to attempt something inadvisable yet impressive. Deep within New Australia's central dome, Captain Rodriguez stared at the translucent cylindrical container placed on the makeshift conference table. Inside, suspended in glowing blue liquid, floated what appeared to be a humanoid figure with iridescent scales and delicate gill structures. "You brought your princess in an aquarium." Rodriguez struggled to keep her diplomatic composure. The Muri ambassador, himself requiring a water-filled environmental suit to survive in air, burbled through his translator. The portable royal transport was the only way to smuggle her luminescence past imperial checkpoints. "We have been water purifiers for the Empire for 9,000 years. They do not question what we carry in our sacred vessels." The liquid in the container swirled as the Muri princess pressed her webbed hand against the glass. A melodic voice emanated from the translator. "Captain Rodriguez, I am Princess Shalura of the Seventh Deep. I come seeking alliance with the only species that has ever defied the Empire and lived." Rodriguez rubbed her temples. "Your Highness, we didn't exactly plan to defy anyone. We're just trying to establish a colony and eventually contact Earth. Yet you thrive on a world designated uninhabitable. You repurpose Imperial technology. Your offspring defeat war beasts in ritual combat." The princess's large, luminous eyes blinked. "And now I bring news. The Empire will execute 3,000 of my people tomorrow for failing water quality standards, a deliberate impossibility set to punish us for suspected resistance activities." The bar had fallen silent, all eyes on Rodriguez. The weight of expectation was palpable. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" Rodriguez asked, though she already knew the answer. "The transport ships have minimal security. With your technology and our inside knowledge." The princess's voice modulated with urgency. "Captain, you represent hope to a galaxy that has known only subjugation for 50 millennia. Rodriguez glanced at Security Chief Martins, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Let me be clear," Rodriguez said. "I can't commit my entire colony to a war against an interstellar empire." The princess began to sink dejectedly in her container. However, Rodriguez continued, "I can authorize a small team to assist with what we'll officially call a technical consultation regarding your transport vessels." Unknown to everyone in the room, 17 different recording devices captured this conversation, carried by representatives from species who had secretly traveled to New Australia after hearing rumors of humans. By morning, the footage would be transmitted across the Empire via secure channels, becoming an underground manifesto of resistance. On Earth, General Kimiko Tanaka studied the latest satellite imagery with growing concern. "Still no communication from the Persistence?" she asked. "Nothing since they entered the warp point 4 months ago," her aide confirmed. "The rescue fleet will be ready for launch within 2 weeks." "Make it one," the general ordered, watching as missiles streaked across the testing range. "Whatever happened to our people out there? They won't face it alone." In the shadows of the briefing room, a janitor with slightly too perfect features watched silently, memorizing every detail to transmit to his imperial handlers. Dawn broke over New Australia, the toxic atmosphere painting the sky in swirls of amber and violet. The warning came not from advanced detection systems, but from Kextal, the Centauri scientist who had been invited for tea 3 weeks earlier and never quite managed to leave. "Imperial battle fleet incoming," he chittered, bursting into the command center. 500 warships. The Emperor has ordered the settlement's complete destruction. Captain Rodriguez was already reviewing emergency protocols when the proximity alarms blared. On the main screen, the sky darkened as hundreds of sleek, predatory vessels moved into formation above the settlement. "They're deploying ground forces," reported Lieutenant Park, tracking incoming dropships. "Estimated 2,000 troops with mechanized armor support." Rodriguez surveyed the room, meeting the eyes of her senior staff. Activate Protocol MacGyver. Throughout the settlement, klaxons sounded a distinctive pattern that everyone had hoped never to hear. Colonists moved with practiced efficiency, their rehearsals now paying off as they transitioned from civilians to defenders in minutes. In the engineering bay, Chief Engineer Chen addressed a team of technicians and video game enthusiasts. Simulator time is over, folks. Those terraforming drones we've been modifying, they're now our air defense. Control interfaces are identical to the VR simulators you've been training on. A 19-year-old woman grinned, cracking her knuckles as she settled into a control station. Just like Stellar Assault 5, but with actual stakes. Higher frame rate, too, quipped her companion, pulling on a haptic feedback glove. Imperial Commander Drakven watched from his command ship as the first wave of dropships descended toward the human settlement. Victory was assured. This was the largest military deployment in the sector's history, against a civilian colony with no formal defenses. Approaching target zone, reported his tactical officer. No signs of wait. Energy signatures detected. The surface of the toxic moon lit up as dozens of hidden emplacements revealed themselves. Devices never designed as weapons, mining charges, terraforming equipment, industrial lasers, opened fire in coordinated salvos. 3 dropships exploded mid-descent. 2 more spun out of control to crash into the acidic plains. They've converted their industrial equipment into defense systems, the tactical officer reported with disbelief. Highly unorthodox, but effective. Commander Drakven snarled. Deploy the main landing force, overwhelm them with numbers. In Habitat Dome 3, 70-year-old Marion Chen, Dave's mother and former demolitions engineer, led an unlikely defense force of retirees and medical personnel. Remember, we're not soldiers, she told her team as they prepared improvised explosives from mining charges and chemical compounds. But we know chemistry, physics, and basic thermodynamics. She held up what appeared to be a cast iron frying pan with wires attached to its handle. And sometimes, the simplest tools work best. When Imperial troops breached the dome's outer barrier, they were met not with surrender but with a barrage of homemade thermite charges that melted through their advanced armor like butter. Marion herself took down a mechanized walker by overloading its sensors with a makeshift EMP device cobbled together from kitchen appliances. Commander Drakven watched in horror as the battle unfolded. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Empire had ever faced. They used mining vehicles as battering rams. Civilian shuttles performed kamikaze runs guided by remote pilots. Most disturbing of all, human defenders continued fighting despite injuries that should have been immediately incapacitating. The female human has lost significant blood and sustained damage to her upper limb, reported an increasingly distressed field medic, transmitting footage of a wounded defender. Yet she has consumed some kind of stimulant beverage and returned to combat with increased aggression. The commander zoomed in on the footage. The human, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage, was indeed drinking from a brightly colored container labeled Monster Energy before rejoining the fight with renewed vigor. They have combat stimulants in their recreational beverages. Drakven whispered, a new kind of fear taking hold. And they consumed them voluntarily. The battle reached its turning point when a boarding party of colonists, led by a limping Marion Chen, somehow managed to infiltrate an Imperial light cruiser. The helmet cam footage later recovered showed scenes that would become legendary throughout the Empire. Humans fighting with improvised weapons, continuing despite injuries, communicating through hand signals and grim humor. Engine room secured. Marion reported over a crackling comm channel. Dave, you want to explain how to start this thing, or should I just start pushing buttons? As the captured cruiser's weapons turned on its sister ships, the Imperial fleet broke formation. Commander Drakven, watching his carefully planned assault disintegrate, made the first retreat order issued by Imperial forces in 7 centuries. In the aftermath, Captain Rodriguez surveyed the settlement from a medical triage center. They had suffered losses, painful ones, but they had survived. As she watched colonists already beginning repairs, treating captured Centauri wounded alongside their own, she realized something fundamental had changed. They were no longer lost colonists. They were defenders of New Australia. And the galaxy would never be the same. The impromptu press conference had not been Captain Rodriguez's idea. 3 days after repelling the Imperial attack, representatives from 27 different species had somehow found their way to New Australia, each claiming to be journalists from independent worlds. The reality that most were resistance operatives seeking confirmation of the impossible human victory was obvious to everyone. Rodriguez stood before the assembled aliens in what had once been the colony's mess hall, now repurposed as a media center. The questions had been relentless for over an hour. "Captain," called a tall, insectoid being with multifaceted eyes, "is it true you plan to lead a full-scale revolution against the Empire?" Rodriguez sighed. "As I've stated repeatedly, our only goal is protecting our settlement and finding a way to contact Earth. We have no intention of." "But you've already defeated an Imperial battle fleet," interrupted another journalist, this one a floating gasbag creature. "Surely you must have grand strategic plans for." "The throne is made of lies." Rodriguez snapped in frustration, unconsciously using a Centauri idiom she'd learned from Kextal. The room fell silent. Then, as one, the assembled press began frantically recording, their excitement palpable. Rodriguez realized her mistake too late. "Wait, that's not what I..." But the damage was done. By nightfall, the phrase, "the throne is made of lies," had spread across 40,000 star systems. Imperial censors, unable to contain the footage, instead tried to discredit it, inadvertently ensuring even wider distribution. Resistance cells adopted the phrase as a rallying cry. On thousands of worlds, the words appeared as graffiti on Imperial monuments. Captain Elena Rodriguez, who had never sought anything beyond the safety of her colonists, became the destroyer of empires by dawn. "They're deploying it." Engineer Chen's voice was unnaturally calm as he studied the transmission. The Emergency Council of New Australia had gathered in the command center to view the encrypted message smuggled from Muri resistance fighters. The footage showed an enormous Imperial vessel moving into position above Aquaria 9, a water world that had recently declared independence from the Empire. At its center, a massive weapon was powering up, its energy signature causing the recording to distort. "The World Breaker," whispered Kextal, his mandibles clicking with fear. "The Emperor's ultimate weapon. It can crack a planet's crust with a single shot." The room watched in silence as the weapon fired. A beam of concentrated energy struck the planet's surface, boiling away oceans and shattering continental plates. Billions of lives extinguished in moments. "They're making an example," Rodriguez said quietly, "and sending us a message." Chen, who had been eating nachos from stress, a habit during crisis, suddenly choked mid-bite. "Wait, freeze that frame," he managed between coughs. The footage paused on a clear view of the World Breaker. That's just a scaled-up microwave resonator with a fancy paint job," Chen exclaimed, pointing to the weapon's core. "The focusing array, the power distribution, it's basically the same technology we use in our industrial mining lasers, just bigger." "That's impossible," Kextal objected. "The World Breaker is the culmination of 12,000 years of Imperial weapons research." 12,000 years of research without innovation," Chen countered. "Look at the energy bleed here and here. They never solved the resonance instability problem. There's a fundamental flaw in the design." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Can we exploit it?" "Not alone," Chen admitted, "but with help." 48 hours later, Habitat Dome 5 had been transformed into what Chen called Crisis Engineering Central. 7 alien scientists from different species worked alongside 3 human engineers and a reprogrammed culinary robot, now performing quantum calculations. Holographic schematics floated between workstations. A ping-pong table in the center served as both break area and impromptu conference table. The resonance cascade needs to hit at precisely 47923 terahertz, explained a Muri physicist, her water-filled helmet bubbling with excitement. That would require penetrating their shields first, countered a spindly Vortak engineer. Not if we use their own communication frequencies to introduce the destabilizing pattern, Chen suggested, mouth full of what the aliens had learned were called hot pockets. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, but remained inexplicably energetic. Rodriguez watched from the doorway as this impossible collaboration unfolded. Species that had been enemies for millennia now working together, united by the human approach to problem-solving. Instead of competing, they were building on each other's ideas, sharing knowledge freely. The most classified intelligence report in Imperial history would later describe this moment with horrified precision. Humans have taken technology that failed to advance in 12,000 years of Imperial research and completely reimagined it during what they called a hackathon weekend, sustained only by processed food substances and an apparent addiction to solving puzzles. What the report failed to capture was Chen's victory whoop when they finally cracked the solution, or the spontaneous multi-species celebration that followed, the first of its kind in recorded galactic history. Emperor Zixvan, supreme overlord of 10,000 worlds and bearer of the cosmic scepter, did something no emperor had done in 30 millennia. He removed his ceremonial armor. "This is madness, Exalted One," Grand Vizier Calvin protested as attendants carefully dismantled the biomechanical suit. "No emperor has walked among commoners since the Third Dynastic era. Yet these humans walk everywhere," Zixvan replied, stretching his 4 limbs, his exoskeleton gleaming in the dim light of his private chamber. "They have no thrones, no sacred armor, no divine barriers, and still they defeated our finest forces." The infiltration plan was unprecedented but simple. Imperial intelligence had created a perfect merchant disguise. The Emperor would personally infiltrate New Australia, observe these humans directly, and discover the secret of their power. His royal guards objected strenuously, but Zixvan's obsession with understanding the human threat overrode all tradition. To defeat a demon, he told his council, one must look it in the eyes. Rain lashed down on New Australia, the caustic droplets hissing as they struck the environmental shields. Through this downpour trudged a lone Centauri merchant, his environmental suit marked with the insignia of a minor trading house. Imperial checkpoints had expedited his passage with unusual efficiency. Zixvan had expected military checkpoints, armed guards, or, at minimum, suspicious questioning at the settlement's entrance. Instead, he found himself processed by a bored-looking human who barely glanced at his falsified credentials before waving him through. "Market district's that way," the guard said, pointing. "Weekly bazaar starts in an hour. Don't miss Chen's noodle stand, best fusion cuisine in the quadrant." The Emperor stood momentarily frozen. Was this a trap? A test? But the guard had already turned to the next arrival, a 3-armed Borrelian carrying crates of produce. The settlement itself defied Imperial intelligence reports. Where Zixvan expected a military encampment, he found a thriving community. The central plaza featured a diverse market where species from across the galaxy, many of them traditional enemies, traded goods peacefully under environmental domes calibrated for various atmospheric needs. He passed a mixed-species orchestra practicing in an open pavilion. The musicians were combining instruments that had never been played together in the history of the galaxy, creating harmonies that made his antennae vibrate with unfamiliar emotion. Most incomprehensible of all, despite knowing they were at war with the Empire, the humans had established an emergency medical center that bore the symbol of universal healthcare. Inside, through transparent walls, he could see injured Centauri soldiers, captives from the recent battle, receiving the same treatment as wounded humans. "First time in New Australia?" asked a voice beside him. Zixvan turned to find a small human female child, offering him a colorful frozen substance on a stick. Yes," he managed, his translator hopefully concealing his imperial dialect. "This is ice cream," she explained. Mom says it's safe for Centauri biology. It's made from synthesized sugar and fruit extract. 3 credits. The Emperor of 10,000 Worlds found himself purchasing frozen dessert from a human child using counterfeit merchant currency. The absurdity was beyond comprehension. "You talk funny," the child observed as she handed him the ice cream. "Like the old recordings in school. All formal-like." Zixvan froze. The royal grammar patterns were encoded in his speech, a linguistic marker designed to identify the imperial bloodline. He had rehearsed common speech patterns for days, but under stress, had reverted to ingrained patterns. "I come from an old family," he managed. The child shrugged. "Cool. Enjoy your ice cream, mister." She skipped away, apparently unconcerned that she had just served dessert to the most powerful being in the galaxy. Later that evening, at a popular establishment called the Airlock Bar, Zixvan's disguise failed completely. While ordering a beverage using what he thought was casual language, the bartender, a former Imperial linguistic analyst who had defected, recognized the unmistakable royal speech patterns. Within minutes, the Emperor found himself surrounded by security personnel, but instead of the execution he expected, the fate any empire would deliver to an infiltrator, he was escorted to what appeared to be a diplomatic dining room. Captain Rodriguez waited there, dressed not in formal attire, but in what she called her fancy hoodie for special occasions. "Emperor Zixvan," she greeted him without bowing. "This is unexpected. Our chef has been notified of your arrival and is adjusting the menu for your biology. We found your royal allergies in a captured database." The Emperor stared in disbelief. "You're offering me dinner rather than execution." Rodriguez shrugged, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Killing you would just mean dealing with your successor instead. Besides, I'm curious why the Emperor of half the galaxy would risk infiltrating our little settlement." As the meal progressed, surprisingly palatable dishes safe for Centauri consumption, Zixvan finally asked the question that had driven him to this unprecedented act. "What is your plan for galactic domination?" Rodriguez nearly choked on her wine. "Domination. We don't want your throne. We're colonists, not conquerors." She activated a holographic display showing blueprints, not for weapons or military installations, but for a multi-species trading hub with cultural exchange centers, education facilities, and open forums for political discourse. "We want to trade, share knowledge, maybe sell some truly terrible t-shirts to tourists," she explained. "Earth idioms on cheap fabric. Aliens love that stuff." The Emperor's worldview, built on 50,000 years of imperial doctrine, faced its greatest challenge yet. The concept of power without subjugation was so foreign that his translator briefly malfunctioned trying to process it. "Then why do your people fight with such ferocity?" he asked finally. "Because you attacked our home," Rodriguez answered simply. "Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We just don't like being told what we can't do. Especially when what we want to do is mind our own business and maybe open a few restaurants." The Emperor of the most powerful civilization in galactic history stared at her, his understanding of power fundamentally challenged. In that moment, he realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or tactics. It was perspective. The imperial capital world of Centaur Prime had never witnessed such a spectacle. Millions gathered in the Grand Plaza beneath the imperial spire, their attention fixed on massive holographic displays. Trillions more watched across the empire as Emperor Zixvan, in full ceremonial battle armor, prepared to address his subjects. From the negotiation patio of New Australia, Captain Rodriguez and her senior staff watched the transmission. After 3 days of intense private discussions with the Emperor, none of them were certain what he would announce. "The rescue fleet from Earth entered the system an hour ago," Lieutenant Park reported quietly. 12 ships, mostly scientific vessels with minimal armaments. They're holding position at the outer boundary as agreed. Rodriguez nodded, her attention fixed on the Imperial broadcast. The sight of Earth ships, home, after so many months should have overwhelmed her with emotion. Instead, she found herself more concerned with the Emperor's next move. The Emperor's voice boomed across the galaxy. "Citizens of the Eternal Empire, I stand before you at a moment of historic transformation. For 50,000 years, we have ruled through strength and subjugation. Today, we evolve." A murmur rippled through the assembled crowds. "I have encountered a species unlike any in our long history," the Emperor continued. "Humans do not seek to conquer, yet they cannot be conquered. They do not worship power, yet they wield it effectively. They turn adversaries into allies not through force, but through something more powerful, mutual benefit." The holographic display shifted to show footage of New Australia, the bustling marketplace, the mixed species orchestra, the medical center treating all patients equally. "Today, I decree the establishment of the Terran Autonomous Zone," the Emperor announced. "A region within imperial space where Earth and its colonies may exist without formal subjugation to the throne. In return, they will share their knowledge, culture, and trade with the Empire." In the Imperial War Room, generals watched in stunned silence. What they didn't know, what only the Emperor's closest advisors understood, was that this diplomatic concession was actually a desperate containment strategy. If humans couldn't be defeated, perhaps they could be isolated, their dangerous ideas of equality and cooperation kept within carefully monitored boundaries. It would prove to be the most miscalculated decision in Imperial history. 5 years later, the shipping lane approaching the Terran Autonomous Zone teemed with vessels from across the galaxy. What had begun as a single colony on a toxic moon had expanded to encompass 17 worlds, each developing into a specialized hub for interspecies commerce, cultural exchange, or technological innovation. On New Australia, now the bureaucratic capital of the zone, the original settlement had grown into a sprawling metropolis. At its heart stood First Contact Plaza, where a monument commemorated the Persistence's accidental arrival. In the airlock, now expanded into a renowned diplomatic venue, Ambassador Rodriguez, she had accepted the promotion reluctantly, hosted representatives from former imperial enemies who now conducted business under what had become known as coffee shop rules, neutral ground, mutual respect, and no weapons allowed except in the weekly karaoke battles. Another trade agreement successfully negotiated, her aide reported, presenting a document for signature. The Vortak and Murier have agreed to joint development of the asteroid belt in Sector 87. Rodriguez signed the document with her favorite pen, a novelty item that played "Take Me Home" country roads when clicked. The Vortak ambassador winced slightly at the tinny music, but had grown accustomed to human eccentricities. 10 years later, Imperial Cultural Preservation Minister Venzar submitted his 19th consecutive report on the human contamination crisis. Throughout the Empire, citizens have begun adopting human fashions, expressions, and most disturbingly, their habit of questioning authority. The practice of voting for local administrators has spread to 23 core worlds, he reported grimly. Citizens are demanding coffee breaks during work periods and organizing what they call open forums to discuss imperial policy. The imperial court, once a bastion of rigid tradition, now featured younger nobles who had studied at the prestigious New Australia University. They returned with dangerous concepts like meritocracy and transparency in governance. 50 years later, the Great Archive of Centauri, repository of all imperial knowledge, underwent its centennial update. The chief archivist, herself educated in the human tradition of historical objectivity, carefully revised the Empire's official history, where once the first line had read, "The eternal empire of Centaur has ruled the galaxy through divine right and superior strength for 50 millennia." It now began. The mightiest empire in galactic history met its match when a lost colony ship accidentally invaded the imperial throne system, and rather than claiming the throne, taught the galaxy that the best form of power is the kind you don't need to use. In a quiet restaurant on New Australia's southern continent, a now elderly human woman shared a meal with an equally aged Centauri, Few would recognize Captain Elena Rodriguez or former Emperor Zixfon, both long retired from public life. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Rodriguez asked, gesturing to the television showing a live broadcast of the newly elected Imperial Council taking office. "Never," admitted Zixfon, who now ran the most popular fusion restaurant in the quadrant. "We feared you would conquer us through force. Instead, you conquered us with better ideas." "Not conquest," Rodriguez corrected gently, raising her glass. "Just the human tendency to make ourselves at home wherever we land, even when we crash the party." The former emperor raised his glass in return. "To accidental invasions and unfazed humans, the galaxy is better for both."